Hello and welcome to another episode of the Monday Night Wars. It is November 13th, 1995, and we are not live with WCW Monday Night Nitro. In fact, we are taped from Jacksonville, Florida. It was taped following last week's live episode, but let's get into it. I am Scott. This is Joseph. Joseph, how are you doing?
I'm great, Scott. How about you, man?
I'm so excited to talk about this first segment, Joseph, and I know you are too. So let's get into it. We start in a graveyard, Joseph. We have Hulk Hogan. He is wearing a black cloak. He's got a black mask on, black gloves. He's wearing a cross. We got a crucifix on, and he's holding a sword. He wants Randy Savage to bring him the head of Ming on a silver platter. And because he doesn't trust Sting, can't trust Sting, wants him in a match next week, Joseph. How great is this promo?
I don't understand why Sting is just the most somehow untrustworthy person in the world. He seems like a great friend.
In fact, Sting may be too trusting. That may be his problem.
Yeah, it's
He
more
trusted
of a downfall.
Lex. Yeah, it's not working for him. But tell me, what do you think about this promo, Joseph? Wasn't it just one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen?
I forgot about this promo. Everything that's coming up in the next few weeks to months, I completely scrubbed from my memory after we watched it together, because we did that a few years ago. And the minute I hit play on this and I realized what was happening, it was just like all of the Vietnam flashbacks coming back, and it was horrible. He says, "Bring me the head of Ming on a silver platter," at least 3 times. And it's like, we got it the first time, and he says it over and over again. I don't know what's going on here. He's talking about the dark side of Hulkamania and still tells you to eat your vitamins and say your prayers, which doesn't really seem very dark to me. In fact, I think he talks about the power of eating your vitamins and saying your prayers. All of Hulk Hogan's promos, especially at this point, they make their point and then they beat it over the head. And my original note here, and I thought it was hilarious, was that they beat it with a dead horse, which I know the saying is to beat a dead horse, but I'm actually going to double down on that. I think Hogan beats his points with a dead horse instead. It's bad. It gets an F for me.
You might be surprised to discover this, Joseph. I loved this promo.
You know what? I freaking knew you would for some reason.
It is awful. It is probably the worst Hogan promo we have seen to date. We've seen some bad ones, but it is so bad. It's like the Kool-Aid Man. It's gone through the wall and we're back on the other side, and it's fantastic. It's insane. And I know I say this a lot about Hogan promos, but they're getting I think every time we have one of these, I say this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. This is the most insane thing I've ever seen. And it's true, because we just keep getting more stupid and more insane. And this might be the peak of Hulkamania's insanity. It made no sense. I have no idea what's going on. It wasn't clear that Hogan is bad. He's not even evil Hogan, like you said, right? He's not evil Hogan. He's dark Hogan. We've been calling him Don Corleone Hogan because he's telling kids to eat their vegetables and all that kind of stuff. But he's got to go to the pit, the depths of dark Hulkamania to defeat the Dungeon of Doom, because they just keep winning. It is incredibly dumb, and I love it.
I'm glad that you got enjoyment out of it. It's definitely hard to watch. I don't know who thought this was a good idea. That's being really negative, but seriously, when you were writing this, even though it was 1995, who was like, yeah, that makes sense. We should do that.
When it first started, going through these, we've prepped a couple of episodes that we're going to record in order here, folks. We're pulling back the curtain a little bit. You get to see behind the scenes. And I got to say, you're right. I kind of forgotten about all the stuff that we're going to be watching for the next couple of weeks. But when I saw this, and I saw the mask, and it clicked in my head what was going on, I started laughing, and I didn't stop laughing until the end of the promo, because it's just, my God, what are we doing? It's great, and I love it.
I definitely think you're right. If you're talking about something that's so ridiculous and over the top, if that's your jam, this is for you, for sure.
And as you know, that is my jam. But you know what else is my jam?
What's that, Scott?
The Macho Man Randy Savage and Ming. 2 guys that I like quite a bit, and they've got a match. Ming's with the Taskmaster. We've got Don Corleone Macho Man now. He is in all black. He is introduced from the dark side of Venice Beach, ladies and gentlemen. Savage comes in from the crowd, sneak attacks Ming. It's a barn burner. It's 4 minutes, 51 seconds. The Macho Man defeats Ming. But after the bell, Shark and Luger attack Savage, and they keep working that arm that's legitimately injured. Joseph, break this down for me.
I do think it's funny that he's from the dark side of Venice Beach. I don't know if anybody here has been to Venice Beach. I think that's where Hogan is actually billed from. I think that's where he's living at this time.
Yes.
But like, has anybody actually been there? Because they're making it sound like Venice Beach is where like people go and find their inner demons. And it's like, no, that's where the people who already have problems congregate. Like, they're always the people where there's a reason why they had the weird homeless man in the promo the previous week or however many weeks ago it was, because like that's the standard at Venice Beach, guys. As far as the match goes, I liked the match a lot. I liked what it was doing. You know, I've been down on Dungeon of Doom for the last few weeks. I think overall in this one, I think this makes sense. So you have this whole idea that Macho Man is coming to, you know, deliver the head of Ming on a silver platter. They've said that a million times. Macho Man doesn't come from the entrance. He does a sneak attack, which again, if you're being dark, I like that. I like that it's not Macho being the standard. And I kind of wish Hogan would take some notes, because it's like, dude, if you're going to be this darker character, be this darker character. As you said, he's wearing black and white head to toe. But on top of that, the white on his shirt is all glittery. It gets an A from me. It's phenomenal. It's a great outfit. Mach ends up fighting both men, both Meng and Kevin Sullivan, who's joined him. Jimmy Hart ends up coming out. Mongo kind of by this point is lost in what's going on in this match. And I got to say, I've been pretty supportive of Mongo on the commentary team since the start of this. A lot of people don't like Mongo. We're starting to see why. Like, he's really starting to lose his touch. He's almost trying to make it about himself a little bit instead of about the match. And it does become a little bit grating. So if you're one of those people who listen in the beginning, we're like, I can't believe you like Mongo. I think when in the beginning he was fine. He was really trying to support what was going on in the ring. Now it seems like he's trying to put himself over on the commentary team, much the way Bobby Heenan successfully does. And that may be the problem, that he's trying to balance with Bobby Heenan too much. Eventually, Mach throws Meng into Jimmy Hart. He ends up connecting with the microphone. Mach hits the elbow and wins. And then Shark comes out and attacks Macho Man. And then Lex Luger, like you said, and then they attack his arm. And it's a good thing that Hogan is here to help protect Macho Man. Overall, the match serves a purpose. It's telling the story. It's moving the story along of basically, Hogan, you're now down to one person again because Mach is hurt, propelling the reason for the Dungeon of Doom to be in this feud. I think that works really well. Lex has been a heel for multiple weeks. They're continuing that, and that needs to continue. Overall, I think it does a fine job. I wish more of the Dungeon of Doom segments were honestly like this, where it's just, we're darker characters, and what that results in is we sneak attack, we beat you down, and not so much the kind of cartoony stuff, because I don't have faith in the way they portray that. Like many years from now, many years from now, in this point, we'll have like a character named Bray Wyatt. If you don't know who Bray Wyatt is, Bray Wyatt does so many dark characters, and even the cartoony stuff that he does, he delivers so well that you are willing to kind of bend reality and go, okay, I'm on board. And they don't know how to do this. But this version of Dungeon of Doom, if they did this every week, I think I would love Dungeon of Doom a lot better. Overall, the segment gets a B for me.
Rest in peace, Bray Wyatt.
100%.
But I do want to go back, because I put something in my notes, because I wanted to bring this up, and you've already kind of touched on it, but I want to go a little deeper with you. You've been complaining week after week about Don Corleone Hogan and how we're just told he's dark. We're not actually seeing it. And here Macho Man gave us a master's class on how you do it. And the funny thing is, we're going to get a juxtaposition here next week in a match with Hogan. They do almost the exact same thing, but it's nothing like this. And I'll tease that. Stay tuned, folks. But let's just talk about this one. This is how it should be done, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. They just did this, honestly, with Sting, I think, last week, where he's holding the Scorpion Deathlock on Flair over and over for too long. You have this idea of, wow, he's really going to a dark place. That works. You have to put the hero in a position where they really have to make a choice between doing what's right and doing what's wrong. And in order to get dark, they have to do what's wrong. That's the choice that has to be made. Even if it's not super overtly wrong, like having a pair of brass knuckles and winning like that, but something that shows you this person really is going beyond their comfort zone to put down the enemy. And you're seeing Mach do that here. Obviously, it blows up on him because he gets double, triple, and quadruple teamed. But at the start of the match, it works. It ends up with him actually winning the match. That's how you make this work. And we're not seeing Hogan do that.
Let's move on to our next match, Joseph. We've got Chris Benoit, Kensuke Sasaki. Did I say that right?
That's the way they're saying it. Unless I'm mistaken, it's actually Kensuke Sasaki. My assumption on that is if you look at players in the MLB who used to play like Daisuke Matsuzaka, usually when you have UKE, that's how it's pronounced. But they spell it with an I at the end, but that's not how it's actually spelled. So this is the way they pronounce it. So for the foreseeable future, we're probably mispronouncing it, but that's the way it is in WCW at this time. So just kind of bear with us, folks.
What an interesting little cultural note there, Joseph. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
No problem, man.
But as we mentioned, as Joseph mentioned, Japanese wrestler, the Japanese invasion is here. Bobby Heenan has taken money, and in return, he is letting Japanese wrestlers into WCW. I don't know how he has this authority, but apparently he does. And they are wrestling at the WCW, and they're trying to take our titles. In fact, the reason this episode of Nitro is taped is because they're doing a show in Japan on November 13th, 1995, and Sting loses the U.S. title at a show in Japan this very night. They're taking our titles, Joseph. First, they take our jobs, and then they take our titles, but not in this match because Chris Benoit defeats Kensuke Sasaki. Bischoff does mention that Benoit is the newest member of the Four Horsemen. If we're just watching Nitro, this is the first time we're hearing of it. Turns out this occurred on Saturday night. I don't understand why they're still doing kind of big, important storyline stuff on their Saturday night program when I assume Monday is now their flagship, but we did. Tell me more about this, Joseph.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting note that you kind of ended with there is like, when did this happen? Most people who are going to rewatch this era like we have are probably going to stick with Raw and Nitro and maybe eventually the Thursday night programs when those come along. So it is difficult. Also, I think if you watch this on Peacock, I don't think they've even got these episodes of WCW Saturday Night available. There's only like 2 seasons that they have on there. There's going to be, unfortunately, some things that you're going to miss. You're just going to have to take context clues and kind of understand. I think when we did this watching, we actually had to sometimes look it up and go, when did these things happen? Like title changes, you'll have like a television championship change or sometimes a US title change. Never world title that I'm aware of. So at least you don't have to worry about that. It's interesting because you mentioned the Japanese people coming in when Chris Benoit is actually Canadian. So this whole match is technically people who are from, foreign lands. The match is really fun, though. It's a really good match. This is simply a pure wrestling match. There's no storyline, so I don't think I can give it an A because of that, unless it was just over the top amazing. Benoit, to me, is probably a top 5 all-time in-ring performer. Not really character work, but just in-ring. He ends up winning with the Dragon Suplex and a pin with a bridge. The match doesn't move any storylines, unfortunately, like I said, so that makes it kind of difficult to grade higher. I give this a B. It's a lot of fun. If you want to just watch a fun match between 2 very capable wrestlers, it's good. And so far, it continues potentially a pretty good show for Nitro.
Again, it's just another example of this great cruiserweight division that they're forming, right? We got 2 guys in the cruiserweight division. The cruiserweight division is very exciting. It's going to be great. And this is just another example of that. Just a good, well-wrestled match. You're right, it doesn't really progress the story beyond the fact that the Japanese wrestlers are here, they're invading, but technically you can't go wrong. And you're right, this is actually just another example of a pretty good night for WCW, because up next we have Johnny B. Bad, who you and I both like quite a bit, and Eddie Guerrero, who everyone likes quite a bit. This match is for the WCW World Television Championship. It goes for 10 minutes, and that's important, because that's how the match ends. It is a time limit draw. After the bell, Randy Anderson has to separate Bad and Guerrero because the match got a little heated. They got a little dirty in it. They were getting frustrated with each other because they knew the time limit was coming and they were trying to win, and they got kind of frustrated and some tempers flared. But good guy Eddie Guerrero, good guy Johnny B. Bad, they patch their differences. They shake hands. Joseph, tell me more about it.
I think you're absolutely right as far as how this night is progressing so far. I'm going to go out and just immediately say I'm giving this an A. I know I just said in the last match, it's difficult for me when there's no storyline advance. This, I think, is an example of a fantastic match where I'm willing to just say, look, I love the hell out of this. Time limit draws, when done well, can be so good, because usually what you're saying is we're going to have two men go out and just give you a wrestling exhibition. I mean, really just look at what they're doing, how they're progressing. You touched on the fact that they're both eventually trying to get to slightly underhanded tactics because they're realizing the time limit is coming. They're trying their best to get the one up on the other one. It's fantastic. I think it does a great job. I actually have a note on this that says I'm officially a Johnny B. Bad fan. We've talked highly of him in the past, and I've always been kind of on the fence of whether or not I actually think he's a great wrestler. And obviously he's going to eventually jump ship, and we'll get there when we get there. And we're not as keen on his WWF gimmick, but this WCW gimmick is so fun. It's such a great I am a good guy gimmick. The crowd loves him. He plays the crowd well. He's very honorable in all his matches. I personally think he does a great job. Some people have spoken negatively about his wrestling ability. I think it's fine. I think it's enjoyable to watch, especially if he's got the right dancing partner. And Eddie Guerrero makes everybody around him look better. The match is great. On top of that, the commentary is quite good in this match too. And in television, I think you have to have strong commentary. Bobby keeps calling Mongo McMichael, instead of Mongo, he keeps calling him Tonto, which is the Lone Ranger's Native American sidekick. It's hilarious. It makes me chuckle every time. If you don't know who the Lone Ranger is, it was a very, very old, I think 1930s radio show, and about this cowboy character. And so Bobby bringing up this reference is something that only Bobby could do, because Bobby's really old. And so it's like not a timely reference at all in 1995. And it makes me chuckle every time I hear it. I love this. I gave it an A.
The Lone Ranger's first radio appearance was January 31st, 1933. So you were absolutely on the money. The amazing internet that we can just look these things up in real time. And I could do that while you were talking, and I did it. Back to the match. You are absolutely right. I was thinking the exact same thing you were thinking. Obviously getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I think we've mentioned it before, so it's not really a spoiler. Eventually, Johnny B. Bad leaves. He goes to WWF. He wrestles as Mark Marrow over there, which is his real name. And we're just not as taken with him over there. We really like him in this character in WCW. He's wrestling good matches. This is a good match. And as you noted, yeah, this one doesn't really progress a story, but the story's in the ring. Like they tell a story from start to finish in the ring tonight, I felt like. As you said, they know the time limit's coming up. They want to win clean. So they start getting kind of underhanded. They get frustrated. They start getting, tempers flaring. We see a little bit of that Latino heat from Eddie Guerrero, and it's just really fun. But they're two great performers. They're two great wrestlers, and they just can't get over on one another in the time limit. And I thought it was handled very well. You're right. I typically don't like time limit draw matches because I like a finish. I like someone winning, but this one was handled so well that it was worthwhile. It was great to watch. The storytelling in ring was great. The technical ability was great. I hope they do more with it. I don't think they do off the top of my head, but we'll see. We'll go ahead and we'll see. After that, though, Bischoff tells us that Hulk Hogan will, in fact, face Sting on Nitro next week. Then we have Gene Okerlund, Mean Gene, and he is interviewing the Giant, Kevin Sullivan, the Taskmaster, and Jimmy Hart. Okerlund is disgusted by what Jimmy did at Halloween Havoc. Jimmy, though, is more worried about what he's going to do with those 200 Hulkamania jackets he's got stored. Sullivan says the Giant's going to win World War III, and the Giant tells us he's going to be the champion forever. Joseph, what'd you make of this?
I'm trying to do better at using my C's to mean I really just thought this was whatever, it's fine, and things that I don't like, start using D's and F's for. So hopefully we'll get better. This gets a C for me because I think overall it's fine. It's not entertaining. It's not anything I would tell anybody they need to go watch. It's a very quick segment, which is nice. At least it doesn't take forever. I think Jimmy Hart starts off with two lines kind of back to back, and one is horrible And then the next one that you've actually already touched on is very, very well done. So it's kind of a weird juxtaposition. The first line is, why is Jimmy Hart and Kevin Sullivan the smartest men in WCW? That's the actual line. I did not say that incorrectly. Well, that's not very smart to say it that way. And then the next line is, the only thing I'm worried about is what am I going to do with my 200 Hulk Hogan jackets? And I think that's a great line. That's a hilarious line because he really does probably have that many Hulk Hogan jackets. So I think that's a very good line. And it does involve the backstory between these two characters. Eventually, Kevin Sullivan brings up the fact that Mean Gene apparently is a betting man, and would he bet against the Giant? I think that's a very well delivered line. It's nice and succinct. And then it kind of ends with Kevin Sullivan having another fake seizure to be Hulk Hogan. It's just kind of whatever. There's, like I said, there's some things that are nice about it, but a lot of things that are just kind of, you roll your eyes and you go, okay, let's get to the next thing. So not too down for me to grade it less than a C, but just not great.
I actually liked Jimmy Hart in this. As you noted, he had a couple of good zingers. I liked him in it. Kevin Sullivan, not as great. You're right. He did have a good line, but I just, I've never been a huge fan of Kevin Sullivan on the mic. I think he's a good in-ring performer. I don't think he's great on the mic. And Giant, at least at this point, is not good on the mic. Two guys that weren't great. One guy that was okay. I actually laughed. I laughed at Jimmy Hart's line about the 200 Hulkamania jackets because you're right. That's probably not a lie. Like, he's probably not overestimating. He probably has 200, maybe more Hulk Hogan jackets. For those of you who may be listening to this and haven't actually seen the Monday Night Wars, maybe don't know who Jimmy Hart is. Jimmy Hart was a wrestling manager, and he's noted for these jackets. And the jackets are like painted on the back. They're really cool. Of just whoever he's promoting. They're airbrushed. Whoever he's promoting at the time, he just has these really intricate jackets. And I think they're cool. But he repped Hulk Hogan for a long time. So he's probably got a lot of Hulk Hogan jackets. But let's keep going, Joseph. Up next, we have the main event. We got Sting. We got Dean Malenko. Sting defeats Dean Malenko in 7 minutes because we knew that was going to happen. I'm sorry, I love Dean Malenko, but yeah, we knew that was going to happen. Joseph, pretty straightforward match. Tell me more about it.
This is another banger match. You're absolutely right. We all knew that Sting was going to win. Sting, by the way, is wearing green and black head to toe. It's not his best outfit, but it's very solid. It gets a B from me. At one point, Eric Bischoff tells Bobby the Brain Heenan, "You've taken con artists to an art form," which I think is a very good line, but also kind of a compliment. That's kind of a nice thing to say about somebody who's already a heel. Like, you're not really insulting him. I know it was meant as an insult, but it doesn't.
Yeah, again, it's a well wrestled technical match. It doesn't really further a story. We just needed a main event, and Sting was the guy. And I don't know if they pulled Dean Malenko. This is not to knock Dean Malenko. Dean Malenko is a great wrestler, one of the greats. I love me some Dean Malenko. He is not a main eventer at this point. So Dean Malenko must have just pulled the short straw or something. I don't know why they booked it this way, but we got a good match out of it, so I'm not complaining.
Well, to answer that question, I would assume the reason they booked this particular match isn't even to knock Dean Malenko. It's to say, we really want to have a really well-wrestled match. We need Dean Malenko to get screen time because he's going to be a huge focal point of our cruiserweight division that we're developing. So we need to get him out there. Everybody knows he won't beat Sting, but the way Sting wins is Dean Malenko actually applies his Texas Cloverleaf, which is his finisher, and Sting has to reverse it into a roll-up. So the way he wins is by having to outsmart Dean Malenko, which would give the audience the impression that Dean Malenko pushed Sting to his limits, and he actually had to really think about how to win this match. I think it's great. It gets a B+ for me.
It's kind of a cruiserweight night now that you mention it, right? We got Dean Malenko in the main event. Before this, we had Eddie Guerrero. And I'd say Johnny B. Bad is probably cruiserweight. I think he's the right kind of weight and class and speed. And he does flips and all those kind of things. We got Chris Benoit tonight. It was a cruiserweight heavy night. And I'm not complaining because, frankly, the cruiserweight division was one of the highlights of WCW in the 90s. Post-match, though, we got Mean Gene again interviewing Sting. And he wants to know what Sting thinks about Hulk Hogan's challenge for next week on Nitro. Sting says he's got nothing against Hogan, but Hulk seems to have forgotten that Sting is the big dog in WCW. And people have been coming at Sting for years, and he's still standing. Why is Hogan going to be any different? This is a banger promo, Joseph. Tell me more.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It got an A from me. It is a great promo. Sting is very underrated in his promos. They are very predominantly face style promos, so very kind of cut and paste, but he delivers them so well with a ton of conviction. He doesn't do it in any sort of a pandering way, which I really enjoy. Also, he's a great friend. I said at the top of the show, I'm saying at this point again, he is a great friend because the whole reason he's in this situation is because of Lex Luger. Lex constantly puts him in bad positions and he stands by him anyways. This is the kind of friend that everybody wishes that they had. And you know what? I got one in you, Scott. I got one in you.
It's
Sting, like,
beautiful, man. You're saying
like
that.
I
Wait, did Paul Bearer just come in here? Was that
that was
Paul Bearer?
beautiful. That was a great Paul Bear. So
That was
Sting,
actually me crying, but it's same diff.
same thing. So Sting, like you said, mentions that Hogan called him a little dog and says he in fact is the big dog, and he's looking forward to facing Hogan. This continues this idea of, is he turning heel or not? Because everything he said is actually very respectable, and I think it continues that storyline very well. Like I said earlier, it gets an A. Overall, when I saw this show, the actual clip art for the show is the Hogan in the mask with the sword. And immediately I was dreading watching this show. But it starts with that. And obviously you liked it. I was not a fan of that. But the rest of the show is a banger episode. It's a very fun show. It gets a B plus from me.
Well, I liked it in context, and the context is that it is genuinely awful. And that's what makes it so hilarious to me. And I love it because it's 90s wrestling cheese. But you're right. Overall, really good night for WCW. Really great matches. A lot of them didn't progress stories, but we got the story progression in between the matches. I thought overall it was a really well done match. From a 1995 booking standpoint, too, to end this on a Sting Hulk Hogan match next Monday, that's a hot match in 1995. Like, people are going to want to watch that. And this just again goes to show you never know what's going to happen on Monday Night Nitro. We got a pay-per-view quality match next week on Nitro. But we're not done with this week, Joseph, because we've got WWF Raw still from the Keystone Arena in Brandon, Manitoba, Canada. We open with a video package. Apparently 123 Kid and Razor Ramon have been brawling like the whole weekend. We get vignettes of them fighting all over the place. So because the 123 Kid might not be impartial, Gorilla Monsoon decides that he's going to change tonight's main event to a non-title match. We got Sid in the main event, we got Razor Ramon in the main event, and we have 123 Kid as the special guest referee for some reason. Just to give you some context on why that has been decided. Joseph, what are your thoughts on this?
I understand what they're trying to do here. I think they had an idea and they wanted to run with it. I understand the idea. I don't agree with the idea. It would have made more sense if the idea to me was that 123 Kid is too far in favor of Razor Ramon, so they want to take the IC title match off, or we're just not going to have him as the special guest referee. Like, that made way more sense in general. Just don't have him as a special guest referee if he's that impartial. Just remove him from the match, because also, I really want to see an IC title match. I love the IC title. It's probably my favorite championship in WWF. I really enjoy it, and I want Sid to say he had an IC title match. Whether he wins or loses, that's kind of important to the standing of his character. So overall, I thought it was like kind of a head scratcher. I don't understand why we're doing this.
I don't recall it being billed. Am I misremembering? Has this been billed? Have we have any hype coming up to this special guest referee
I had
match?
to look it up. I had to look it up while you were talking. I don't remember anything in my notes.
So why even do it? But we do it, as you'll find out, folks, to further a story. But we'll get there, because first we got to get through a couple of matches. And our first match was no match at all, because we got Henry O. Godwin and Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Helmsley tries to spray Godwin with perfume, but Godwin counters and just slops himself. Hunter Hearst Helmsley is disgusted by this, wants nothing to do with Godwin, and runs away. Godwin chases him to the back. The match ends in a no contest. Joseph, what do you think?
Surprisingly, I enjoyed this. The reason I enjoyed this, and again, I had to go check my notes to verify. The week before was the week when Hunter Hearst Helmsley put on the gloves very carefully and slopped Henry O'Godwin. So the idea here is Henry O'Godwin's like, that doesn't scare me. It doesn't matter. I'll just slop myself right now and let's wrestle our match. And obviously, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, being the way he is, cannot stand this, wants nothing to do with this. And so he runs from this. I think the idea is pretty sound. I would have liked to have seen a match because I think both these guys have done so far pretty well together. But they're probably going, let's just save this for an upcoming pay-per-view. I think we've got one pretty soon. Makes a lot of sense to save it for that. Let's just wait. And I think that's fine. It gets a C for me only because there is no match. But I did actually think this was enjoyable. The only knock I have on any of this is that Jerry the King Lawler is back on commentary.
I knew you were going to say that. In between the matches, though, we've got Doc Hendricks. He's hyping Survivor Series. This is the go-home show for Survivor Series. And we've got a package hyping the return of Shawn Michaels. That's pretty exciting, Joseph. You got thoughts on this?
No, I think we'll just let it play out because we're going to be talking about it a lot over the next few weeks anyways.
Let's move on to the next match then. We got Ahmed Johnson. We got Jake Steele. Of note, Shawn Michaels appears on split screen. He says he knew he could trust Ahmed when he saw Ahmed slam Yokozuna a couple of weeks ago on Raw. They love that slam. And to be fair, the fans love that slam. So they continue to bring up that slam. Ultimately, though, Ahmed Johnson defeats Jake Steele. Joseph, what's going on here?
As far as the Shawn Michaels segment, again, one of the reasons why I just want to move on, the Shawn Michaels segment in the picture-in-picture, he puts over Ahmed Johnson huge in this. And I do love that because when we've talked about this a number of times, at this point in WWF, Shawn Michaels is one of your top stars. Bret Hart's probably number one. He's been champion a few times and all that. Diesel probably up there as well because he is champion. So you've got that. But right behind them has got to be Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels. So those two notable wrestlers, putting anybody over is huge. You'd probably want to be working with them so that way you kind of get a lot of key rivalries or key matches or key segments on the show. You're going to get a lot more screen time. Him putting over Ahmed Johnson is great. I think it's great for his career. I think he does it very cleanly. It's a very quick promo. It doesn't beat you over the head or anything. It's fine. The match, it's a squash match, unfortunately, so there's nothing to really say about it. Ahmed Johnson completely steamrolls Steele. Crowd noise is popped in or piped in rather. I think that's kind of annoying. But then Ahmed is interviewed by Vince, and I genuinely have no idea what he says. It gets a C for me.
Yeah, I was gonna kick that to you. I have in my notes. McMahon interviews Ahmed after the match, and Joseph speaks Ahmed Johnson, so I'm gonna let him handle it.
I tried to write it down, and I have no idea what he said.
So there you have it, folks. I know a couple of you have told us you're watching along with us. So go back, watch it, and if you, gentle fan, speak Ahmed Johnson, let us know what he said.
That'd be great. I'd love to know.
After that, though, Joseph, you can buy a 1996 WWF calendar. And if you buy one, you get some Diesel shades and gloves. What do you think?
It's not as big as the Pogs, man. I'm not going to spend my hard-earned money on this. Bring back the Pogs.
Bring back the Pogs indeed. Yeah, a calendar doesn't seem that exciting, but which I guess is probably why they have to sweeten it with some Diesel shades and gloves. But after that, though, we get a sit-down interview, Joseph. We get a real deal interview with Diesel and Bret Hart, moderated by Vince McMahon. Diesel says he's the best there is right now. Bret thinks he should have never lost the title in the first place. They know that their match at Royal Rumble ended in a DQ, and Bret never got a rematch. Break down this interview for me.
Scott, I think you'll be surprised to hear that I love this interview.
I am a little surprised because, the two guys being interviewed, we've noted, not super great on the mic. I will say not bad this time, but go on. Tell me more.
No, you're absolutely right. And here's why I like it so much. You and I have obviously watched quite a bit of this going forward. So there's a lot of things that we know about the direction of both these gentlemen after kind of this era. Specifically when it comes to Diesel, he will eventually become really what I would assume is Big Daddy Cool, which is not super over the top, but very calm and collected and just super chill. And I don't really care about your opinions. And I'm just going to speak from the heart and I'm not going to raise my voice. And he does that here. And that version of Diesel, aka Kevin Nash, is by far the best version. By far. On top of that, he's surprisingly diplomatic to start this off. He puts over Brett a lot, talks about what a great wrestler he is. And unless I'm mistaken, around this time, backstage, they're not exactly close. What makes this segment even better is that facade of diplomacy will eventually fall as the segment goes on, and I love it. Bret Hart says more than I do, which is amazing. Little side note for anybody listening. Scott and I regularly have to edit out my uhs, and I didn't realize it until I started editing these programs.
How many I edit out? You didn't realize how many I edited out until you
and
listened.
While I was watching this Bret Hart promo, I was thinking, I gotta edit this. So that was pretty funny. Eventually, Bret Hart starts talking about how he is by far the best wrestler that Diesel has ever faced in the past. And then on top of that, he's the only one who's ever given Diesel a challenge. And this is a shot. This is 1000% a shot. This is speculation, but I'm gonna put all my chips on this one. This is absolutely a shot. And Diesel recognizes it because Diesel and Shawn Michaels are boys. And he says, don't toot your own horn. Shawn Michaels gave me a run for my money too. My guy's shooting at this point. And then eventually Bret Hart actually does a really good job of putting over Diesel, which I've seen Bret do a number of times. We talked about that. He's done it in pay-per-views. He's done it on Raw. Bret actually does a very good job, I think, of in his promos, which are usually pretty boring and formulaic. He usually will do a pretty decent job of putting over whoever the competitor is and really what they're good at and how tough this is going to be for him and stuff. So I enjoy that. After a number of Bret Hart's, I really think if you're watching this, most of the show is pretty not great, but this one's a lot of fun. If you're watching this, you'll notice Bret Hart's taking some clear jabs. I'm not going to go over all of them because we just don't have time, but Diesel starts scowling harder and harder after like more and more of them. And unfortunately, Bret Hart will then say, the hitman is like a Timex watch. I take a licking, but I keep on ticking, which I think he thought was a great line. I think it's a hilarious line. I don't think it's a good one. Overall, I think this segment is really fun. They unfortunately pipe in a lot of crowd noise, which really just is obnoxious. But the segment is fun. This is really well done between the two of them. It's also no screaming, and I kind of like that. So overall, I enjoyed this. It gets a B+ from me.
I agree. As I said before, Diesel, Bret Hart, typically not two guys we consider great on the mic, but I thought this sit-down interview format really worked for them. I thought it was handled really well. As you noted, I think there were some real jabs in there. I felt the tension. I thought it was good. It got me hyped for the match. I'm excited for it. But let me tell you, Joseph, I'm not as excited for that as I'm excited for Karate Fighters, because next up we have McMahon, we have Lawler. They are doing the Karate Fighters. Lawler wins. His victory is overruled when it is discovered that he taped the foot of his karate fighter to the platform, Joseph. The scandal of the night. Do you have thoughts?
I do. Number one, I love this. I'm going to be as quick as possible on these. These Karate Fighter segments have made me laugh every single time. I think this is great between both men. Personally, I know I've knocked Jerry the King a lot. I think he does a great job on this. The funniest thing in this whole thing is whoever is trying to do a Howard Cosell impression, and they're just horrible at it. Howard Cosell was a sports commentator, a broadcaster, most notably for boxing for many, many years. He's got a very distinct delivery. It's bad. This is really bad, but the segment's a lot of fun. I'm not going to grade it because it's just an advert, but I love it.
You know I love this kind of crap, so I enjoyed it. It's silly, it's dumb, but it was fun, and it sold the product. So I think they achieved everything they needed to do there. Up next, though, since you mentioned how great this night is for WWF Raw, we have King Mabel with Sir Mo, and he is wrestling Roy Raymond. Okay. As you might guess, King Mabel defeats Roy Raymond, but we do get the Undertaker, who is in the shadows to hide his quote unquote crushed face. He vows revenge on King Mabel. Vengeance will be his. And Lawler wants to see what that face looks like. Joseph, break this whole thing down for me.
You've literally broken the whole thing down. There's literally nothing else to go into. I'm going to give it a C because of the vignette. I think the vignette moves along the story, and I liked the vignette quite a bit, but the match is nothing to write home about. It's another squash match. We've had 2 this week. I think we had 2 last week. And it's like, bro, where you guys have other people, like you couldn't have had Sparkplug Bob Holly in this match. Like, it still would have been a squash match, but at least we know him. We've seen him a number of weeks, so we know who that guy is.
Yeah, it's a squash match. There's not much more to say about it. The Undertaker vignette is good because Undertaker's very good. And Jerry's kind of a sicko because he wants to see that crushed face. After that, though, we have footage of Razor Ramon and 1-2-3 Kid losing the WWF Tag Team Championships. We're reminded again why they don't like each other at the moment, why they're feuding. And that leads us into our main event. We got Sid with Ted DiBiase. We got Razor Ramon. And we got the 1-2-3 Kid as the special guest referee. There's a lot that goes on here, Joseph, so I'm going to let you mostly break it down, but I will give kind of the end just so everyone knows. Sid defeats Razor Ramon, but it's not clean. Razor Ramon gets Sid in the Razor's Edge, but the Kid pulls Sid down. This is a heel turn. The fans are shocked, and he quick counts Ramon after a Sid power bomb. Post-match, DiBiase puts a $5 bill down Razor's throat, and the Kid takes it for himself. What a tragic turn of events, Joseph. Tell me all about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't believe you missed the Bill Clinton, that he's back and hyped for Survivor Series. That's got to be, I mean, that I know you are a huge Bill Clinton mark. You love him.
One of my favorites. I saved all my Bill Clinton talking for Survivor Series because we get him a lot at Survivor Series.
I forgot about that. All right, we'll move on. The match, I think, is honestly a lot of fun. I think everybody does their job as best they can in this. I'm sorry, that sounded kind of patronizing. I think they do their job very well in this. Correct that. I think they do a good job. Obviously, we've been talking about this 1-2-3 Kid heel turn for many weeks. Is he going to? Is he not going to? I don't think it's been as good as some of the stuff we've seen in WCW. They've also had some is he going to or not going to heel turn with some of their wrestlers. But it's fine. They execute it very well. You mentioned Dean Douglas. He's obviously been kind of this on the fringe rival with Razor Ramon for many weeks. So I think he works in this. Honestly, I really wish they had just put Dean Douglas with the $1 Million Corporation. I think that would have made a lot of sense. Dean Douglas could say it was the smart move because I'm a smart person. $1 Million Man can do his whole I buy everybody thing. And now you don't have a stable of kind of jobbers, which they've had for quite a few weeks. Now your stable would consist of Dean Douglas, 1-2-3 Kid, who you're trying to put over and is kind of a rising star. And also 1-2-3 Kid's been a focal point for a long time. A lot of fans liked him. And on top of that, Sid. And Sid is a big kind of enforcer. I think that stable makes a lot of sense personally, but they don't do that. Unfortunately, that's just kind of daydreaming, but they do a great job of turning 1-2-3 Kid heel. At some point, Sid takes a nasty electric chair drop. He also, I think Sid has one of the best I'm dazed faces imaginable. Like you'll see him do it like when he takes a super kick or anything to the head, really. And he does this kind of blank stare into the crowd, and it actually makes me laugh every time. And I mean that in a very positive way. It's not comedic. It's really, really well done. The segment is fine. It does a good job of everybody hitting their marks. Kid is finally officially turned heel. We've been waiting for this. I'm okay with it. I think Kid really needs this because Kid isn't great on the mic. And usually a lot of wrestlers, when they're finally able to start being a bad guy, they get to start perfecting some of their mic skills. Because they don't have to be as formulaic. They can be very insulting. They can sometimes speak from the heart, and it'll eventually do him well. It'll take a bit for us to get there, but I enjoyed this. It got a B- for me.
Yeah, overall, I thought the match was fine. Yeah, you're right. I didn't really mention the Dean Douglas run in so much. I kind of just really gave the finish of the match, but Dean Douglas does make an appearance. Really, the match, though, is about 1, 2, 3 kids heel turn. It tells a story. I thought the match overall was great. I think as far as we're going for WWF Raw tonight, it is without a doubt the best match of the night because the rest of the matches were not really much of matches, and one was not a match at all. So definitely the best match of the night for WWF Raw. And, Razor Ramon is great. Scott Hall, great wrestler. Sid, not as good, but I think he holds his own in the match. And it told a story. It was good with me. After the match, though, Jim Ross goes to meet with Camp Cornette. Dean Douglas is there. Importantly, Razor Ramon makes an appearance, and I think he's going to murder Dean Douglas. Joseph, what did you think about this as we head up for the night?
I think it's a very simple way to end the show. I think it works well. It's pushing to the big match at Survivor Series that they're all going to be participating in. I think it's quick and short, and I like that. I thought it was fine.
Well, that ends it for us tonight, Joseph. Who won?
Well, I think I gave WCW a B+. I could not even remotely say this matched that. I think this is a C+ show. It's a very fine show, and I mean that completely. It's very fine. Like if you watch it, you're not going to want to gouge your eyes out with anything. It's just, it is what it is. It's a decent show to move you on to the next one. It's not, if you compare it to a go home show, it's definitely not a great go home show. But that being said, I thought it was fine. But WCW really had some great matches. Some of the, the first segment wasn't too great, but the matches in general were really, really fun. So I got to give it to WCW.
WCW clearly won tonight. Pretty much all of their matches were good, enjoyable, fun. They didn't really progress storylines, most of them, but they were still just great technical matches. Most of the matches on WWF Raw also didn't really progress stories, and most of them weren't really matches. We had the first match was a no contest. The Ahmed Johnson match was a squash match. The Mabel match was a squash match. Really, the only match of the night for Raw was the Sid and Razor Ramon match, which I thought was a good match, but it does not make up for the fact that other than that, we really didn't have any matches tonight, and we did on WCW. WCW absolutely wins. But Joseph, what did the fans think? Who won the night?
Well, the Nielsen for Raw this week was a 2.6.
And the Nielsen for Nitro was 2. So Raw won the night. Does that surprise you at all?
No, not really. We talked about this, I think, last week, that because of how poorly some of the episodes of WCW had been in the last few weeks, you could see the trend going down. And I think what we're going to see probably, I would be surprised if next week the trend stayed down. But I think WWF was doing a pretty good job, so I'm understanding why their trend went up. Again, I would be surprised next week if their trend stayed up.
Yeah, I think you're going to see kind of a lag, right, during this time where WCW might be hot for a couple of episodes. People kind of tune into them, and then they have a couple of stinkers, and then we move to Raw, and then Raw might have some good ones, and then some stinkers, and you'll see people switch. So I think you're going to see a delay. They're not necessarily going to line up perfectly. Raw won the night, even though we think show-wise, WCW won. And that's it for us. As always, I'm Scott. With me is Joseph. Good night, everybody.
Bye, guys. Hey, everybody, it's Joseph. Did you like this podcast? Well, we hope that you did, and also that you join us every Monday for new episodes. You can listen to us on Spotify, and soon we'll explore other platforms to bring you episodes of the Monday Night Wars. Did you listen to this podcast and think, pretty sure they're wrong about that? Well, let us know. You can email us at mnwpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's mnwpodcast@gmail.com. And correct anything we messed up. Don't worry, you won't bruise our egos. You can also give us suggestions, follow the show, or even just reach out to us on the following platforms. On Twitter, you can reach us at MON Night Wars Pod. Again, MON Night Wars Pod. And on Instagram and Facebook, you can reach us at Monday Night Wars Podcast. And finally, if you feel like supporting this podcast and also getting bonus content, you can follow us on Patreon at Monday Night Wars Podcast. For the low price of $2 a month, you get every episode of the Monday Night Wars and also every breakdown of every WCW and WWF pay-per-view during this era, with more content to come. Again, and one last time, thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. We'll see you next Monday back here on the Monday Night Wars podcast.
Because up next we have the main event. I think my voice broke a little bit there, so I'm going to try it again.
I love that. You got to keep that in.
I'm hitting puberty, you guys.